Hello, everyone. Hello, our guest. Hello, Callum. How are we all doing by the end of the
Excellent.
February?
Pretty good.
Good. Yeah,
We're
it's
going.
going fast this year already, isn't it? We're like a sixth of the way. That's crazy.
Yeah, I was thinking even before this call that this is the beginning of the February, but then I realized that's the end already. So yeah, that's my stage. Yeah, we are joined today by Filip and Jordan, straight from Umbraco HQ. Guys, how's the beginning of the year and February itself going for you? Dan, was it busy?
It's been just a little bit busy. It turns out there's quite a lot to do when you want to launch a new product to market. So we've been pretty busy. Yeah. It's,
okay. We will definitely talk about it. And you, Filip? Just another product, or?
I mean, it's not very often that we actually launch new products, right? So of course it's a big thing for us. And January was a lot of getting ready, and I mean a lot of preparation for the Wins keynote and everything that happened there. And I think like after that, now it's just the team doing the work, so I can relax. So that's good.
Less busy.
Nice.
Must be
Sounds
nice.
like a good plan.
Yeah.
Sounds like a good plan. We are all jealous and envy, so yeah, that's okay. We will get there at some point. Callum, what about you?
Yeah, busy as well. Very busy as well. We've equally had a couple of things to get ready for launch. We've a lot going on. I don't know, and I've been traveling back and forth around places here. I had DDD Melbourne last weekend, where Umbraco had a booth, and there was a really cool game that Emmanuel had made where he had two PCs and like a scoreboard, and you put your details in, you selected easy mode or hard mode, and then you had some tasks to go complete, and it would spin up an Umbraco instance on cloud for you. You have to go complete the tasks, and it would use the management API in the background to validate that you'd actually done them correctly, which was really cool. And then put your time up on a board. And of course, I had to beat the top of the board. There was no way I was letting
in easy mode, of course.
So I did get the top of the board in good faith, and then I was like, I know I can get this better, and I did have several further attempts to get it down to as short as I possibly could. Anyway, yeah, it was great. It was really good. The game that Em had made was fantastic, and the whole vibe of that event. I think Marcin, I said it to you a few weeks ago. It's one of my favorite events. Very good event. Great to see Umbraco represented there.
Yeah, that's awesome. Cool. Yeah, so everyone is busy. I'm also having a final week before my trip to US, but not for work this time.
Basketball.
Yes, I'm just going to watch some basketball games. So that's the purpose of this trip. But yeah, a final week before any travel is an awesome one. So I'm getting ready. I'm getting ready for the final week next week, and yeah, then I will probably join you, Filip, in this less stressed mode. But yeah, until then, we can talk about everything else. And yeah, of course, Umbraco Compose is the topic and the product that we've been talking and thinking about. Can any of you tell us, and everyone else who is watching and will be watching it later, what it is, if they have missed the announcements and the information about the product itself?
Yeah. So I guess Compose it's a new product that we've just launched about 2 weeks ago now, and it's a software as a service. First of all, it's not something you host; we host it for you. But then when you sign up and you create an account, it is a product that is designed to take data or content from a variety of systems. So specifically from Umbraco CMS is clearly one of the most well-supported products that it can take content from, but it can also take content from all of your backend systems. So if you've got an ERP or a CRM or all of these different systems with 3-letter acronyms, digital asset management, learning management systems, LMS, it takes content from all of these types of platforms, and then it's able to unify that content. So kind of combine that content from those sources and serve it through a really high-performant GraphQL API to any of your like your web applications or your other various delivery channels, mobile apps, advertising kiosks, whatever you've got that you want to actually surface that content. So yeah, I guess that's kind of what it does in a nutshell, I suppose.
Very good. Can I ask what it isn't? Because we have Hardcore, and Hardcore's got GraphQL. So what's the difference between the two products?
Yeah,
that's a good question. Compose can kind of be thought of as the next step for Hardcore. So we initially, when we were creating the product, we thought about, do we just build this capability out in Hardcore? Hardcore is a little bit more locked down. So Hardcore you can think of as a software as a service headless CMS. But if you need to be able to get content from other sources, then Hardcore is not quite the right place to do that, because the delivery platform in Hardcore only takes data from the CMS instance that it's connected to. So if you need to get, for example, products from a PIM system served through that GraphQL system, then in Hardcore, you need to pass it through the CMS, which is not ideal, because now you're kind of mastering that point. Now you've got that data stored in multiple locations. So you've got it in your PIM and you've got it in Hardcore. And now your content authors or your back office users potentially get quite confused about where they edit it. So like, we as developers presumably know that you should edit it in the source of truth or the system of record, in the PIM. And then there's an integration where it kind of flows through Hardcore and is surfaced on your front end. But content authors don't know that. And so they'll often make changes in the CMS. And then, the next time that data is synced from the PIM, it gets blown away and they get further confused. So you can kind of think of Compose as Hardcore that's able to take in content and data from all sorts of other platforms. But then the really cool part is kind of how you can combine that into one kind of unified output. And spoiler alert, we've got a little demo for how to do that a little later.
Yeah, we are all looking forward to it, because again, the problem existed. I think that was also something what we faced multiple times in the past. Like, we were synchronizing data, we were synchronizing this data as well, and of course there were a lot of failures with that, as you mentioned. There is no single source of truth. Synchronization takes time. So tools like this are to avoid moving data when it's not needed, and generally combining the information. And yeah, whenever it was announced, it was just, again, for us as an Umbraco developers and people who works a lot with the CMS, it's like, okay, so this is for Umbraco, but generally it's not only for Umbraco. Hardcore can be the source of the data, but any other data source can be injected there, right?
Yeah, that's correct. So Compose is basically designed to work with whatever products are in your ecosystem. And that means it works with pretty much any CMS that you want to bring to the party as well. So obviously we envisage in the early days that Umbraco CMS will be a large part of what you use it with, but there's no reason why you couldn't bring any other CMS in as well. And you definitely benefit a lot if that CMS already has some headless capability. So Compose talks JSON, I suppose, as its native language. And so it really helps if your CMS does have headless APIs or webhook support or, that kind of thing already. But there's no reason why you couldn't bring CMSs without those features into the fold as well. Just would be a little bit more work on your part.
Or things that aren't a CMS at all, right?
Or things that aren't a CMS, absolutely.
It's a data source gets ingested and then you consume it.
Yeah, exactly. I think there's even a use case for like multiple CMSs, both like as a migration story, but maybe even like as a permanent solution. Like, you have a marketing team somewhere that really likes WordPress to write blog posts, and that's fine. Like, no reason to change that. Let them do that, and then the blogs part of the website can just be run out of that, and no one has to know, and no one has to change systems and stuff, and everything's still served through Compose. I think there's plenty of use cases where that kind of thing would make sense.
some kind of like an ongoing refactoring stories as well when you're replacing parts of your systems and stuff like that. Awesome.
We've heard stories where people have like followed that sort of strangler fig pattern to replace or migrate Umbraco sites either old to new or between like different platforms where you have parts of your system still being served by the old platform. So certain routes go to the old platform and others go to the new one. And this is I guess a more modern way of doing that, where your front end talks to the delivery layer and then
wherever the data comes from doesn't really matter. And I think like one of the things I've been realizing in the last 3 to 6 months is that I think like making sure that your data is stable and comes from the right sources and is something like in the rise of AI development, that's going to be even more important. If you know that all of your data lives in Compose and it has the right sources of truth, then you can let your marketing team go crazy with all their stuff on the front end and build a new client every day, build a new website every day, and it just consumes Umbraco Compose, and it will stay fast and it will stay safe, and it will like you will get all of the benefits from it. I think that's a pretty cool way to think about it, right?
That's a great point. And of course, with the AI thing, like structured data works best.
Yeah, exactly.
Those sorts of platforms, and having all of your data then in one, in well-defined schema is.
If we can be a little nerdy, and I know we can on this podcast, that like the fact that Compose supports the introspection query that's part of the GraphQL standard means that like an AI can just make out a request and ask Compose like, so what can you do? What data do you have? How is it related? And it will give it all back, and it will know instantly, how to deal with the data, how it's related, how to make the queries that are correct, and like it will get all of that just from that query. So I think that's pretty powerful. Also, like if you want like insights to your data, because it has all that capability out of the box, like it really enables AI to shine.
I was going to ask one question before we will maybe see the product itself. Is what and how much of an Umbraco was kind of used or needed or sourced for the product itself? Is it completely outside of the Umbraco ecosystem code and infrastructure architecture perspective, or was there a lot of lessons, Philip, from the past and from your experience?
There's definitely lots of lessons learned, but everything is built completely independent of Umbraco. Completely independent of Umbraco CMS, completely independent of hardcore. Everything is rebuilt, but of course based on everything that we've learned, based on what does it take to do something that is that needs GraphQL to scale. We've learned a lot about that from hardcore, etc. So there's no dependency on Umbraco CMS anywhere in Compose. You can run it without. You can do it exactly how you are.
Written in Java or PHP.
Both. Jordan, you should talk maybe
finally
just a little bit.
Finally we could have used the language that we always wanted to use. Fresh product. No,
I'm happy to dive more into the architecture if that's where we want to go. But just to add on to what Philip said before we take that is there are some NuGet packages available for Umbraco CMS specifically that we consider part of Compose, and those are currently they're just closed source, but we intend to open up that integrations side. So in a couple of weeks, when we make those preview packages, so they're presently in preview, as soon as we make them public final releases, then they will also be open sourced, and we'll make that repository open to the community for contributions and collaboration. But those packages sort of allow you to ship content automatically from Umbraco CMS into Compose, so that you don't have to do any of that integration work already. And additionally, they sort of allow you to choose content from Compose as though it were in the CMS back office, even though it's not. And we'll see that soon.
Yeah, and just so I understand, that not wishing to spoil your demo, Jordan, because we'll come to that in a second, but we can essentially see Compose in two parts, right? We have what you're calling the management API, I believe, which is the way that you define your schemas and you would use to ingest data into the platform. And then there's the delivery aspect, which is the GraphQL layer that we're referring to, and the management things like REST REST-based JSON API, and the delivery layer is the GraphQL thing. And so those packages you're referring to is just a way, they're just wrapping calls to those APIs, I'm assuming.
Yeah, that's correct. The product is really aimed mostly at developers. Like the people who are ultimately going to get the benefit from it are, you know, your content authors and your back office users and your business people. But for the most part, if we've done our job well, those people will never necessarily know that Umbraco Compose is actually involved here. They'll just keep using the tools that they keep using, and everything will kind of work and be plumbed together. So the people that we're mostly aiming the product at are developers, agencies, in-house dev teams to kind of build and enable those capabilities. And so it is quite API first. So we sort of divided up into 3 different APIs. So you mentioned management and obviously GraphQL to get the content out. And you did mention ingestion, but we kind of consider that a separate function, but it is quite related to management ultimately. Okay. So ingestion is how content goes in. Management is how you sort of administrate the project, where you set up, you know, CI environments, where you configure webhooks, all of those things that involve some configuration but aren't directly content related. And then obviously GraphQL is how you get the content out again at the end.
Nice. Let's go to a demo. I want to see it.
Yeah, it's fun to demo. I mean, we when we first talked about this almost a year ago now at Code Garden, like, you know, we had a very techy demo, and that, I mean, it is a very techy product, right? Like it's very hard to demo. Then here for the winter keynote, we really tried to build something that was, you know, end user focused on value and stuff. But I think for this, for today and for this audience, I think the tech demo is probably more what we want, right? So Jordan, take it away. Tell us what you have.
Cool. Okay, so here you should see presumably my Bruno client here. So Bruno is just an API tool. It's just like Postman if you've used that, or any Insomnia, any one of a number of those kind of tools. And what I've got for you here is, first of all, what you're looking at on the screen right now is what we call a type schema. And type schemas are Compose's equivalent of document types in the back office of the CMS. So this is the document, the JSON document that describes what your content looks like, what kind of properties are available on it, how does it relate to other pieces of content, and all of that kind of stuff. This is a JSON schema. So this is built using a standard that is already out there. We've tried as much as we can in Compose not to do anything too proprietary. Where we can, we've relied on open standards that are already fairly well adopted, so that it makes it easy to incorporate into your ecosystem. And so you can see this is a really simple type schema for a product, and this was an internal demo, so please forgive me some of the dark humor and some of these.
Ruined. Amazing.
Yeah. So a product has a name. We might store a quantity of how many of those are available in Compose, and yes, as a bit of an internal joke, that is unfortunately going out to the world now. We store a count of how many lives have been ruined by a particular product. So this is just one example, right? But you can have many properties. Many document types will be more complex than this. We'll see one shortly. And properties can have different types. They can be nested under one another. You can have array-based properties. So you can have, one-to-many relationships, many-to-many relationships. And this is just a really simple example of 3 kind of basic properties. So this is what a product looks like. And if I want to, so this is just a GET request, but I have previously pushed this type schema into Compose. Mm-hmm. And currently you need to do that through the APIs. In time, we will have some basic functionality in the cloud portal where you can kind of see these in a code editor. We're also thinking about infrastructure as code type tools to be able to manage these from a Git repository or using your software development tools of choice, and then having a command line tool to be able to manage these. So these are scenarios that we'll have support at some point, but for the moment, you just make an API call to create these type schemas. And so then once I have this type schema in the platform, then I can ingest some content. So this is how I get content into the platform. We have this ingest API, and you can see it looks pretty straightforward and simple. This is a bulk ingestion. So I'm taking in an array of many products at once, and you can perform different actions on those. So for the most part, the one that you're going to be using most frequently is just an upsert, which is obviously like if the thing is not in Compose already, then it will insert it. And if it is there already, then it will update it. And so
can I ask, sorry, does that do like partial updates? So if I was to give data with only one, like just the name prop, will it only update name, or does it overwrite the whole?
At the moment, no. It is a roadmap feature to have a patch action and then to use like JSON patch in order to do partial updates. But at the moment, the upsert operation is a full blow away what's there. So there's one little gotcha that you might want to know about before you get started. And you can see that I'm just ingesting. So the object that I ingest has an identifier. This is just an arbitrary string. You can put whatever you like in there as long as it's unique. We have the type schema for which the content is a type of. We have this action, and currently you can upsert or you can delete things from the platform. And we have then the data, which is basically the properties that you've defined in your type schema. And so you can see I'm inserting about 10 products into the platform. And yeah. So then when I want to get that out again, I hit the GraphQL API, and I will just I'll make some changes to this query in a second. So GraphQL, for anyone who hasn't used it, it might seem a little bit intimidating, but as a consumer of a GraphQL API, it's really not. It's scary on the server side. Trust me, we've lost a few nights sleep over that API here and there, but on the client side, you shouldn't have to. So this GraphQL query, you can see, is getting everything out of the products collection. So that's another, that's just a collection is effectively, you can think of it as a folder for content. So it's just a flat list of content. And in this case, when I ingest, it's actually part of my route here. So I say, put these things into the products collection. And when I then go to get it out again, we say, I would like to get all of the content from the products collection. And for each item in that collection, I'd like to get the ID. And if it's a product, because you can put many types of content into a collection, it doesn't just have to be the one type. And in this case, the convention that I've set for myself is products go in the product collection, but you could just as easily have a more generic collection name and put multiple types of content in there. And so we're saying if the item is a product, then go and give me those 3 properties. If I don't care about some of these properties, one of the beauties of GraphQL as opposed to REST is all of that is just built into the query language. So you can see when I omit the quantity property, then I don't get it in the response. Likewise, if I omit the ID property, I won't get it in the response. So one of the cool, excuse me, sorry, having some mechanical difficulty here. So one of the cool things about GraphQL is that your queries are only going to return exactly the data that you ask for. And that's part of that is the reason why we've chosen to support that over REST, for example, for delivery, is because with REST, we see with like the CMS delivery API, for example, where you kind of have this quite custom syntax and you know, this almost DSL to be able to do some of these operations, whereas with GraphQL, this is all sort of supported natively by the technology. And that just sort of adheres to our philosophy where we're trying to use these technologies that are very much standard rather than building these kind of custom experiences on top of it, so that you don't necessarily have to have non-transferable knowledge to work with Compose. So that's kind of how we get content in, how we define the type schema for that content, and how we get it out again. But that's kind of like the boring stuff. Where Compose gets cool is where you start integrating it into the CMS. So if I fire up, I've been signed out for an activity, but if I sign into a CMS instance that's running on my local machine here, then we can see here I have set up a fairly basic website, and I have this campaigns folder which contains like some landing pages for maybe some marketing campaigns that I'm running. And if I have a look at that, I've got this one down here that is currently published, and it's a fake 2026 Umbraco Compose launch sale. And you can see I haven't gone too far to set up many properties here. This isn't supposed to be a real looking site, but it's supposed to get the point across. You can see this is a pretty standard Umbraco CMS document type, and or content item rather. So obviously we've got some tabs, they've got some different properties. And so what I've done here is I have installed, this is just a vanilla Umbraco CMS site where I have installed the Umbraco Compose package. I have made no other customizations whatsoever. I have no startup code or anything in here. I have just installed a NuGet package, and then I've configured some app settings to point at my Compose project. And whenever I hit save and publish here, this document is going to get sent to Compose, and I've told it to go to the content collection. So this request here is another GraphQL query where I say, from the content collection, go and get me all of the landing pages with this name. And I could just easily have done that based on the route or the ID or anything really. So you can kind of filter these queries to just get the content that you want. And then I've said for each item, there's only going to be one, because there's only going to be one thing with this name. I've said, go and get me the ID, and then go and get me some of the properties associated with that content item. So you can see I'm getting the meta description and the keywords from that SEO tab, and those are returned here on the response. But what I actually want to talk about is this property here, this featured products, because this is a new entity data picker, they call it in the CMS. And it has been configured to use Compose as a data source. So I'll go and have a quick look at what that looks like. So if we go here to data types, and I've called it product picker. So this is what the configuration for an entity data picker looks like. And you can see we've got this Umbraco Compose data source. So if I was to create a new one of these, then entity data picker, then I get presented with this data source option. And in my case, there's only one option because I've installed the Umbraco Compose package. But in time, the CMS may have support for other data sources as well. But once I've picked that Compose data source, then I can set up which type schema that I would like to. So this is a picker effectively for content from Compose. And so I can say, only allow me to pick products out of the products collection. And then there's a little bit of configuration needed to just tell the CMS which fields to get back. In time, you'll be able to kind of template these and have them display in a nice custom way, but we'll talk about that soon. So you can see like this configuration is really straightforward. And I've just said, allow me to select 0 to 5 of these products from Compose. And then if I go back to my content item, I can see when I hit the choose button here, it actually shows me the products from Compose, and it kind of looks like they're native to the CMS. So I can choose a number of these to add to my content item. And if I save and publish that, then when we come back here, I should be able to go and add the featured products here to my GraphQL query. And for each item in that collection, if it's a product, I should be able to get, for example, the name and the number of lives ruined by that product. And
items.
Oh, thank you very much. Good catch. And so now in my response, you can see we have 3 items that were selected in the CMS, and that's all embedded in the context of this page content type. So this is how Compose kind of takes these different content types and unifies them together in one response. So this is how I can kind of create a landing page.
Nice. I have one question about the types. Is there a way already to have a type that bundles multiple types from Compose?
Oh, that is such a great question.
Yeah, so if I have a look at, for example, my landing page, because this is also something that is done by the Compose plugin for the CMS. So that NuGet package that I talked about, in addition to providing that data source and shipping content across, it also creates your type schemas automatically for you in Compose. And so you can see my landing page document type looks like this, and you can see it. It kind of, JSON schemas let you define these schemas that this one kind of composes or inherits from. You can think of it as like almost a little bit like type schema and like type schema inheritance. And then you can see that it has some properties from Umbraco CMS itself. So we go and get like the created date and the route and the name and the ID, so those kind of basic properties. But if you look at the route, you can see that it actually references this type from definitions. And so JSON schemas can actually be composed of multiple kind of partial type schemas. And so like the route here, you might have multiple content items in or you might have multiple routes for a given item. And then, that means that you can kind of reuse this piece of type schema. Additionally, you can also kind of define type schemas that relate to other type schemas. So in this case here, you can see if I go and look for the property called featured products, which is right here, you can see that this featured products is declared as an array of items of type node. And this is kind of like the base Umbraco Compose type. So this is the type that has ID and variant and some of those kind of like fundamental properties. But in time, we would actually like this to refer specifically to a product type schema. So for the moment, it's kind of generic, which is why when I query the campaign, I need to use this, we call this a fragment here in GraphQL to say, only get me the products in the featured products property. But in time, you will be able to sort of say, only use the product type schema that we defined elsewhere. And then your GraphQL query will be able to be simpler because you won't have to have this fragment, and GraphQL will just know automatically that there are only products in this property.
Hopefully is it similar with conditional access to those properties? If there's an ID reference, like this product has ID X here, this X ID is having prices elsewhere. Get me the product where ID is equal to something. Is there? Or is it 2?
I mean, you can do that in GraphQL. So yeah, like if you wanted to get the product, you've got these filters here. So in this case, I've said, go and get me the landing page where the name equals this. But these filters are actually quite complex and quite advanced. So you can have Boolean conditions. So you can say where some criteria and some other criteria, for example. So that would perhaps let you do that kind of thing. You can also kind of bundle multiple GraphQL queries into one single request as well. So you can say, go and get me the landing page where this, and also go and get me maybe the maybe a recursive structure for the nav of the page, so that you only need to make one GraphQL query for your whole page.
I was more thinking about, for example, getting the price of the product from the table where the prices are having IDs of products only, right? So something like on the schema already, right? But again, it might be joined on GraphQL, of course, but the question is it needed or desired to also have it in the schema, for example, right? If the schema will need to have the product already with the price that is coming from the different source, for example.
Sorry, you take it, Philip.
No, the schema defines what you can query, right? So if you want to be able to query, and that's also kind of like an added feature, right? Like we don't limit what you ingest to what you have in your schema. So you can, if you want to start a new feature, you can start ingesting it, cover it behind some other schema types, and have other sources, or have your new front end use something that's not really available in the main API yet or something. But GraphQL is pretty powerful, and the cool thing about all these queries, filters as they're called in GraphQL, I believe, is that it's all standard based. So again, from that introspection query that we talked about, like open up your code editor of choice, and it will be very, very, very helpful in writing the GraphQL query that you need.
I guess that's what's powering Jordan's autocomplete when he's building that query here.
Exactly.
Yes.
Does Compose support the concept of like saved queries? So can I have a ridiculously complex thing and say I always want to get these types back, and just give me a really nice easy way to say, bam, give me that response. And even better if you guys can sort of pre-cache or do whatever on that data to make sure it's efficient. If it was
absolutely. So I'm on one screen, apologies, so I can't actually see what's being streamed at the moment, but I'm assuming that my screen is still shared.
API docs.
Yes.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So we have this site here called apidocs.umbracocompose.com, and here you can see this is kind of just like effectively like a Swagger equivalent for our management API. And you can see that one of the things that is available here are GraphQL persisted documents. And so these are, we've got some routes without nice friendly names on them, I see. But these are exactly what you were saying. These are kind of like a pre-saved GraphQL query. And so it allows you to basically save a GraphQL query and give it a name. And then you can just say, run the get all products query, for example, and potentially you can pass that saved query some variables if you do want it to vary. And at the moment, we don't cache those up front or do anything particularly special with them, but that's some thinking about where we might be heading, is like we want to pre-warm all of your persisted queries. At the moment, it does save you some performance. So you'll get a response back a lot quicker if the results of that query are not cached already, because, if the results of that query are cached already, even then you'll get back a faster response, because basically you're not sending as large a payload to the server. So, GraphQL queries can get rather large. If you want to bring back a lot of properties, you might have a GraphQL query that's, 100 or a couple of hundred lines long, and it's not huge, but that's a few kilobytes over the wire. And so like just sending the name of a query is a lot faster. And then additionally, that's probably how we're going to deal with access control at some point in Compose as well. So if you only want certain fields to be available, then we're going to sort of suggest that you use persistent queries. And then when you create OAuth applications for being able to authenticate to the APIs, then they'll have, you'll be able to scope those to only be able to run certain persistent queries or certain groups of persistent queries.
Nice.
Yeah.
I was just going to quickly take a chat from a question from the chat here, which is Carl asking, GraphQL, is it read-only? I suppose so. And I think in GraphQL, that's called mutations, isn't it? The idea that you can actually use the GraphQL endpoint to also mutate data, but is that the case on the roadmap?
That's correct. GraphQL, if you want to update it, it is by using mutations. We've chosen not to support that at this time. Like GraphQL is just how the content is delivered, and ingestion happens through that RESTful ingestion API. So GraphQL is read-only.
I think that makes sense, like as well with the way you've positioned this with ingestion being its own separate thing that you can then control as and when that gets called and what that's actually doing. And also what we were talking about, upsert versus patch, like again, that's behavior that's going to just add complexity to the GraphQL endpoint for a data source that probably may not speak GraphQL either. So you'd have to write code to map to that anyway. Whereas most of these platforms, as you said, if it's got an API, it should probably work quite well. They'll have a REST API.
That actually segues nicely into this other thing that touches on ingestion and mutating data, which are these things called ingestion functions. Now, I don't have a demo for these prepared, unfortunately, because they're pretty cool. But what this is these ingestion functions are some managed JavaScript. So you write a JavaScript function that can mutate a payload that you send to Compose and transform it into something that Compose understands. And we will run that for you inside of Compose whenever you hit that ingestion function. So what that means is if you have an external application that supports firing JSON webhooks, for example, when something changes. So let's say it's your PIM, and whenever you save a product, it fires a webhook. You can point that webhook directly at Compose, and then you can create one of these ingestion functions that maps the payload from your PIM webhook to something that Compose understands. And what that means is you don't need to create a middleman. So you don't need to point it at an Azure function or, run some horrific batch job every night to go and do a export out of your PIM or whatever. You can just do that mapping or that translation kind of inside of Compose itself.
And those ingestion functions, what triggers them? So you mentioned like a webhook, but can they be scheduled or is there other options, other models there?
Yeah, at the moment, what triggers them is when you call them via a specific URL. So you'll see on the ingestion API, you kind of have three options. Either you can put to the kind of what we call the standard ingestion endpoint, or you can put or post to an ingestion function. So it's just basically the same thing, except you append your ingestion function alias to the end of the URL. So they're on demand at the moment, but we do have plans to be able to run that same functionality both on a timer. So you can say, run this function every 24 hours or whatever, and then it can actually make HTTP requests out to your PIM to go and fetch data and pull it into Compose. And we also have plans to potentially offer this for our own webhooks on the way out as well. So Compose supports outgoing webhooks such that when you update some content in Compose, we can fire a webhook to a downstream system. And at the moment, that webhook has a specific payload that we define. And so it means that whatever's listening to it kind of either has to be custom or it has to know, somehow how to mutate that payload into something that it can do something with.
Yeah.
But we'd like to apply these same functions, the same functions concept to outgoing webhook payloads, so that you can actually transform them before they ever leave Compose. And what that will enable is you can basically just point your Compose webhook at your search provider, for example, like maybe Algolia or Elasticsearch, and then you can just basically put content straight from Compose into there, again, without needing to create that middleman that does the translation for you.
Very cool. These, I know you don't have a demo, but so these functions are code. So what's the language?
JavaScript. Yeah. So
nice.
it doesn't support all of the JavaScript APIs that are available in your browser, for example. It's a subset, but all of the basic stuff that you would expect, you can call math libraries, you can map objects, you can do that kind of pattern matching stuff. And we support a slightly stripped back version of the fetch API, so that you can also make web requests to other services inside of those functions.
There's no Bitcoin mining or anything like that.
Probably no Bitcoin mining. They're somewhat limited in terms of runtime and how much memory they can consume and stuff like that.
I do remember a lot of times when a tool like Pipedrive, for example, was used to exactly do this, like a process payload to hundreds of processors on top of the payload to then serve something at the end. And again, it was a middleman, as you've mentioned, Jordan, like yet another tool in the process, which was just transforming data. And now the less tools, the better. We all know that. So that's great to see this as an option. I haven't seen that as well yet. Yeah, that's nice.
Can I pry on the architecture, because that's what I find really interesting, like what's going on behind the scenes with infrastructure and all of that jazz. So even if we look at those ingestion functions, like that's your provisioning compute that allows us to run JavaScript code on the server. So how does all that work?
Yeah, it sounds a little scary, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I'm not going to lie, it still sounds a little scary to me as well. Okay, so yeah, Compose infrastructure. I guess if I'm still sharing my screen, we can probably stop.
We've removed the screen.
Fantastic. Yeah, the limitations of being on one screen. I'm not sure whether I want to give everyone an infinity mirror or not. So Compose is built largely in .NET, and we got started with Microsoft's Aspire, which I would thoroughly recommend to anyone looking to create pretty much any kind of .NET application these days, but especially if you're working with something that's reasonably microservice-based or service-based. So Compose is a service-oriented architecture on the inside, and it is hosted in containers at the moment in Azure App Services, but at some point we may move to a more flexible hosting setup, like a Kubernetes or something to that effect. And yeah, it's sort of those logical endpoints that you witnessed in the demo. So GraphQL, ingestion, and management are all kind of their own APIs. There are their own applications, and then we have a few behind the scenes things as well. So we have what we call an ingestion worker. So when you call the ingestion API, we wanted that to be super fast, super responsive. It just does very minimal validation before it then goes and puts your content on a queue to be ingested. And that queue is then handled by a worker that just sort of asynchronously handles the content in the background. And over time, that lets us do things like, if you have updates that you don't maybe care as much about, you don't need them to necessarily be there in real time, that allows us to kind of potentially, with your aid, make decisions about, do we need to push this content to the front of the queue? Is it urgent, or can it just, maybe this is just a nightly job where you're ingesting a whole bunch of stuff and we can just handle that in the background for a while and it can take a little longer. So those ingestion workers, and there can be multiple, depends on the load, they just kind of run and handle ingestions. We then also have, so that kind of delegates some work off to other workers. So we have a webhook worker if webhooks need to be fired that handles kind of the life cycle of a webhook, coordinates retries with backoff and all of that kind of stuff. We have a functions worker, the ingestion functions worker. So at the moment, that is the way those work is there is a technology called Gint, and it's a Microsoft employee developed JavaScript sandbox for .NET.
Right.
And there's actually, I'm trying to think, there's a similar technology, and I'm completely brain farting at the moment on what it was, but we were deciding between two different interpreters effectively, but one of them needed to be hosted outside of .NET and caused us some initial problems in terms of like how we sandbox it and how we prevent potential abuse scenarios effectively. Whereas Gint it just runs effectively a JavaScript interpreter inside of .NET, and then you can give it a whole bunch of parameters around how much memory you want to allocate it. You are responsible for choosing kind of what goes into that sandbox, so what gets injected in. So by default, it doesn't have any access to file system or anything like that. And you have to basically provide it the APIs to anything that you want it to be able to do. And then you can limit, CPU time, all sorts of things. So yeah, it's quite a cool technology. If you're
just looking at the GitHub repo here, I didn't know this was a thing. That's great. So essentially, you're firing the file or the string of the JavaScript that someone's told you to execute at this environment. You've got a queue that will say, I need to process that task. Go fetch the relevant script. You try and execute it, and you then report the results.
Put it back to the queue.
Exactly it. Yeah.
Very cool.
It seems a lot scarier than that, and I'm sure that we're going to keep an eye on it in future to make sure that there's nothing weird going on. But conceptually, like, we were trying to attack it. We were trying to find faults with it, and it's like, well, this seems way too simple.
I think this priority topic that you've mentioned, and for example, cascading functions of processing data, this is where it's probably going to be fancy and challenging too as well, because that's always a problem, not even only in distributed systems, right? So that's
can we drill into that a little bit more? So priority, the infrastructure it's shared, I presume, across.
Yeah, so the infrastructure is shared. Yes.
Okay, so if another customer throws 10,000 jobs at the queue and I throw one, like,
so we've learned a lot from Hardcore in this respect, because if you can think of a nightmare scenario where one customer accidentally denies service from other customers, we've dealt with that in Hardcore, and it's not fun. So we've learned a lot of those lessons for Compose, and basically there is a lot of logic in the platform that is responsible for managing how much of Compose any given tenant is allowed to consume. So effectively how many things that you are allowed to ingest in parallel. So our ingestion workers, we have a number of instances. Each of those instances has a number of threads. And so any given customer is only allowed to consume up to some cap of threads or whatever the resource is in question, because we do this in GraphQL as well. So if one customer's hitting GraphQL really heavily, then you're also only allowed to run some number of queries in parallel before yours start getting queued and other customers won't. So there's a lot of that kind of stuff goes into a multi-tenanted SaaS that we've learned the hard way from Hardcore and have built into Compose right from the get-go.
Okay, cool. And you mentioned like priority within your own queue? So is that something in the future that we may be able to indicate, hey, this is like my number one priority task. Don't care what you're processing. This has to happen right now. Or yeah, when you want to get to this, that's fine.
Yeah, that's the plan. So at the moment, there's no concept of priority within your own within your own queue, as it were. But yeah, eventually we would like to have you able to opt into perhaps low priority ingestions. And currently, if we look at the pricing model for Compose, which we can talk about a bit more soon, it's limited by, so one of the primary plan limitations is like the number of content items that you can ingest or change or remove per month. And so we want to sort of encourage and support customers who opt into not using as much of our compute or as much of our resource, or allow us to schedule those differently to avoid traffic peaks or traffic spikes, right? Yeah. So if you have low priority traffic and you're okay with it coming after minutes or, whatever, instead of seconds, then you will be able to opt into that. And we might then go and support that scenario by making it count less against your monthly consumption total.
Yeah. That's what all the big AI platforms and analytics platforms have been doing. Charge you half for a low priority call that they guarantee within 24 hours, and that generally it's much quicker, but then that means they can prioritize compute for customers that are paying for high priority or do actually need it to be ingested.
Yeah, exactly. One of the lessons that we've seen with Hardcore is everyone wants to ingest at midnight.
Midnight UTC.
Batch jobs that just run that spike compute consumption through the roof and kind of mean that we need to keep surplus compute around, which means that then we need to pay for that compute and we pass that charge on. And so, we'd like not to have to do that. And we'd like to be able to pass some of those cost savings on. And so like having people opt in to say this compute is actually just schedule it when you've got capacity available, that benefits everyone.
Yeah. Pricing you mentioned there, so we can touch on that. So it looks like ingestion is your primary billing mechanism. Like you, in theory, don't throw on to this.
Yeah. So the idea, of course, is that if you run a professional plan, if you run a professional project, you should be on a professional plan. If you run an enterprise project, that's of course how it's meant, right? And the point of us putting some limits in or some limitations in to say like, how do we help people choose the right plan? And ingestions, of course, I mean, as Jordan has explained, like since everything is cached, like our main cost comes from ingestions, and that is typically where that something that grows along with your complexity. And it was really important for us to not do something that would encourage you to do bad architecture. Like there's a lot of platforms out there that limits how many collections you would have or how many type schemas you would have or anything like this. And to us, that just means like if you want to save money, like you can game that by just doing terrible architecture.
Throw everything in one document.
Yeah, exactly. And like no one wins from that. And exactly
as well, per user pricing is another bad one because then everyone just uses one account.
Yeah. So instead, like we really wanted to do something that made sense and something that also, if you optimize for cost, it actually like we win as well. Because if you send us less ingestions, we have to do less clear caches, and then we win. So the only addition on top of that is like GraphQL complexity, and then how many uncurrent or uncached concurrent requests you can do. So like right after a cache clear, how many requests can come in at the same time before.
So would that mean if let's say I had an endpoint, a query that was calling and it included the current date time, would that effectively mean that every single one of those GraphQL calls was a uncached request because you had we more or less, a little simplistic,
take a hash of the request that you send us, and if you send us that before, we serve you the same response as last, unless we updated the content and stuff. So if you send us a new request we haven't seen before, it's by definition going to be an uncached request.
Makes sense. Well, how does how does that cache work? Is that, are we talking like a kind of Redis-esque distributed cache that you've got, or is this that you've compiled some kind of other store somewhere with the results?
So this sits on the Cloudflare edge, so it's going to be cached by each instance, and Cloudflare is going to, I think Cloudflare pushes them around, right? But that probably takes a little bit of time before they hit everywhere. But we built some there's a caching mechanism in the GraphQL worker, the one that actually takes a look in the database and stuff. There's a cache mechanism there as well. So if 2 requests come in from 2 different Cloudflare records at the same time, we'll only do it once. Still, or or even if they come into the same one, right? Yeah.
We've had situations where we're using Cloudflare's edge caching and then have 2 users from different geographic locations making more or less identical calls, or times that by hundreds if you're running a global campaign.
Exactly.
Then it adds a significant load, so you'd very quickly hit your 10 concurrent if it was like the homepage, for example.
That's exactly why we built that thing. So if we detect that an ongoing database lookup is already happening for this request, then we just pause it and hold it until we get it back from the database and respond both of them, and then that's of course going to update the cache. So after that it's going to be uncached.
Nice.
It's going to be cached.
Another hard-learned lesson from hard.
Yes. So as you can see, we've really taken a lot of the learnings also in terms of customers starting to ask for a multi-region or dedicated resources, if they want to run their entire setup, or if they want their data to be hosted in another region somewhere. We've built with all of that in mind, right? So while we don't have prices yet for what it would mean, we would be able to spin it up in a very shortly for a customer who would want that, right?
I was going to say, there's a real world scenario where someone might want to ingest 10 million items, let's say. 10 million documents.
And they want to make sure that no matter how much, they want all the compute that's available. They want everything.
And compute or something like that. I was going to ask, the region choice is interesting. You've chosen Germany. Why?
Yeah, that's a great question, because originally we were hosting in Azure East Europe with Hardcore, right? The West Europe, rather. Exactly. It's kind of the default, European Azure region, effectively. And we actually started having some challenges with PostgreSQL compute. So we use PostgreSQL in Hardcore and Compose, but it's got fantastic JSON document storage as well as relational support. So it's kind of a nice, almost hybrid SQL, NoSQL. But we use that extensively. And what we found was one day we went to scale the compute in Hardcore and Microsoft said no.
Yeah.
And
that's not really how cloud is supposed to work, right? But
we were a little bit surprised by this.
So it's really someone else's computer then.
We try to spin up a new subscription for a customer, and the default allocation is 0 cores of compute. It's that's all we can give you. 0 cores. What?
Yeah.
0 cores? Nothing.
Yeah. So we did a bit of research into different Azure regions, different service levels of support and stuff for some of the Azure compute that we were using, and Germany West Central was by far and away the best looking option.
Nice. So and realistically, if you're in the EU, it doesn't matter because it's in the EU and Cloudflare's in front of it anyway. And I believe, did I see there was plans for Canada region or another region or US region?
The US region will be the first one. So we're not exactly sure whether it'll be US East, West, Central. Not 100% yet, but that one will be inbound fairly soon.
So the plan is not to keep the Compose environments necessarily or the regions in sync with what cloud offers. It's just where can you best serve a customer? It's got the compute, it's got the capacity, and like we said, by its very nature, it doesn't really matter because it's a globally cached and delivered service.
Yeah, it's more for rather than the delivery side of things, it's more for governance or data sovereignty requirements that customers might have to keep their content in one region. So it's more about that and less about the performance or the delivery because of that Cloudflare CDN. But yeah, in terms of which regions we offer, we will start with, obviously we have launched with Germany West Central and the EU. We will very soon be adding support for a US region, and they'll probably roughly mimic the cloud regions, I think, on the whole. You know, some kind of
alignment where your customers are as well.
Canada, etc.
Yeah, nice.
UK, yeah. But yeah, for the moment, they don't necessarily need to be coupled to the cloud regions.
Cool.
Is there a public roadmap of the product available anywhere, or is it bundled with the general roadmap?
It's in the general roadmap, so you just select Compose and you see all of those.
Yeah,
I need to have a look at it.
There's a filter now on the roadmap page. Breaking news.
I was about to give you a loaded question, and I'll check if it's on the roadmap first before I. I'll ask it anyway. Why not? So we've spoken a lot about data ingestion. That's all good. And it makes sense. Like you're taking, you know, as you said, products from a PIM and ingest that, and you might then want to display that on a front end on a website. But what about assets and media and documents and files, like binary data? Because whilst that's not quite the same challenge here, in that I want to be able to query it, having a unified delivery layer for all of that stuff is handy. And you can imagine your PIM has images attached to it. Maybe those are referenced from a DAM. But that will give you some kind of URL. Maybe it's on a CDN, maybe it's not. But like on Umbraco, we out of the box in the core CMS, we've got image cropping and processing and the other things that come with that. Would be amazing if we could have some.
We've discussed this. We've discussed this a few times. Also, this was some of the input that we got from our community team around this. And I mean, for launch, we just start out with like what's the core value of the product. Obviously, this is what we start with, and then I mean we haven't made any final decisions on whether this is something we want. I think a lot of times, you know, you spin up a Cloudflare in front of whatever you have, and then you get more or less 90% of what you're asking for, right? Like you get like Cloudflare does all of the resizing and all of that for you as well. And in many cases that will be enough. And if you're using Umbraco, of course, we would encourage you to use Umbraco Cloud, and then you get it out of the box there as well. And so it's So we've chosen to not prioritize that a lot
for that data, but not for the data coming from these other platforms. So
no.
There are also SaaS for that, right? So there are some tools which are meant to only process the images and videos, right? So in the worst, or not in the worst, but in the desired case scenario, there is always a tool to use, and also to ingest the media too, right? So that's the composability. But that's nice. Yeah, it's looking good. Where people can learn more, and I think we need to direct people and ask somewhere with the lessons here, because it looks awesome. Again, it's an early phase of the product. It was just and again the shortest month ago that it was launched.
It's on the docs page. It's the API docs that Jordan showed off. Like the cool thing about Bruno that Jordan shows off is that you can kind of export like a configuration of everything, and that means it's very easy to play with if you want to just play with the APIs. If you go to umbraco.com/compose, I guess that's kind of where you go where you go get started. You sign up, you go on a call with Jordan, and he'll tell you everything that you need to know, and go on a product with you, and set everything up.
At the moment,
that's the good thing about the fact that this is an enterprise product, right? Like we actually we don't expect 1,000 people to sign up every day, so we can set it up so people get started properly, and we help them and we hold their hand in the beginning and stuff.
Yeah, so at the moment, exactly as Filip says, reach out to us and we can, we do trials if you have a good reason for wanting one, and sometimes they can just be you want to play around. At some point there may be a self-service trial option, but for the moment it's just a case of get in touch through the form on umbracocompose.com/compose.
But it's also not the kind of product you can just play with. Like you need a use case. You need a You need to know how you're going to use it, don't you?
Yeah. But I mean, try to rebuild something. Try to rebuild the winter keynote demo or something. It's not very difficult. Set up a CMS, push that data in there. I get all the products I used in that demo. I asked ChatGPT to create for me, so it was just make me 10,000 items in a Google sheet, and it did everything for me, right? So it's
cool.
And we will also link the materials that were already published regarding the Compose and some other topics as well. But there's one more for partners, right? Which we discussed before going live, which is when exactly next week.
I think next week we're doing a partner webinar where we talk to partners about like how do you actually sell this to your customer. We're talking to one of our local partners who've actually sold this to a customer, and ask them about their experience.
Follow the route. Yeah. But that's cool. Yeah, we'll also link it up in the description. So yeah, it seems like we are all looking for more case studies and adoption in the wild.
For sure. I mean, we can't wait to get people actually trying to build something with this and getting somewhere. I think that excites us all very much.
Absolutely.
Very nice. Very cool. Sounds like, was this a long journey to build?
Yeah.
I know hardcore learnings are obviously a few years old, but what's the time frame to build an Umbraco Compose?
Yeah, I guess we've been at it now for the better part of
just over a
year and 3 months, something in that time frame. So it was right at the end of 2004, I guess. So
24.
Yeah, 2024. Numbers are hard. So what we showed at Code Garden last year was just a little over 6 months into the development. And then another 6 or 7 months later, and a little bit more now, 8, 9 months, and we've got something.
Very cool.
3 months from now, it's Code Garden again.
I was going to say how much of an AI involvement helped to speed it up already. Seeing the facts around the market. Is it a part?
It's something we've played around a little bit. We're not in the orchestration team. We're not the most sophisticated of AI users. Like we're using Claude, and we're not the type of developers who have an entire fleet of agents on hand and we're coordinating. A lot of what goes into Compose is somewhat performance critical, and since it's multi-tenanted, you might be surprised to learn that like the training data that goes into these models doesn't include a lot of closed source multi-tenanted SaaS products. So we find that like a lot of what gets suggested is code that we can't necessarily use as easily as you might be able to if you didn't have some of those performance or multi-tenanted specifically concerns. So we use it a bit though, obviously for debugging. It's fantastic for some of the more mundane tasks, writing tests and, scaffolding out features before then when we go and add them. There's been a healthy amount of Claude usage. And,
I think you can mention, you talked earlier about like, how would Compose work with infrastructure as code? And Alan from our DevRel team, he built a little tool that actually does that, and that was very much AI, right? Because that's take all of these API endpoints and turn them into some files and disk that I can put into source control, and then make some kind of tool that updates if they're not the right thing and stuff. That's exactly the kind of thing that AI is really good for. Whether we think it's ready for something that we will share with customers yet, I think that's maybe a little too soon. But I think it's a great example of where AI totally speeds up development. Something like that would have taken months or at least weeks to build yourself, and you get very far in a few days, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And yeah, as you said, a couple months from now, you will be demoing something out of the next period of time too. And yeah, there are quite a couple of events in front of us, which we mentioned last time when we talked here. And there's a public calendar, which we of course will link, on which you are all, not all, but many of you from HQ will be there, and probably everyone can also reach out and talk about not only Compose, but everything else too, right?
For sure.
So what's the next event then when you are going to? guys?
I'm going to Spark in a few weeks. The day before Spark, we're running a hackathon on all of the. I mean, primarily maybe around all of the stuff we've talked about on AI. So I think that'll be a very interesting hackathon to join and to be part of. There's a few of the people from the team coming as well and stuff. I think that'll be cool. We're really encouraging meetups as well to do hackathons on that. So I think we'll see a lot of HQ involvement in many of those as well if meetups want us to come. We're happy to. And then of course, then we're closing in on Code Garden Copenhagen this year. It's gonna be very nice. We found a very, very cool venue, just very close to the train station, so super central. It's gonna be an amazing event. I don't know if it's public yet, but I think we more or less finalized the program now, and there's some really cool.
Everyone is seemingly posted on LinkedIn and Twitter speaking from nearly everyone. So it's quite easy to work out who, Jordan being one of them. I think next week it's coming, is my understanding.
All right.
Yeah, I think they're pushing to get everything locked in by Friday, so I think next week's a very robust guess.
On the event side, so Spark, they have got like 2 days left to buy tickets. So if you want to go to Spark, there's a handful left. Go get a ticket. It's always a great event.
Yes.
I will sadly not be there this time, but it's quite far away. And actually, I'm in the US for a different thing. But I was going to say next week we've got a big event happening in Melbourne over here, where Max will be over in this region for a couple of weeks, and he'll be touring around. There's a couple of partner events, and there's also this 360 Melbourne ANZ 360 event happening, where it's like hybrid of community and some HQ things. So there's that's on Tuesday, and then the following Tuesday or Wednesday in New Zealand as well. So it's great to see the community here being a bit active, and I'm sure we'll hear a lot more about Compose, Engage, all the things you've been pushing recently. So that's my next Umbraco, and then Code Garden. It's going to be a while.
And what about you, Jordan? Then, what's your next event on the map?
For me, unfortunately, no Compose talks at Spark this year. We reached out a little too late to be included in the program, but Code Garden for me.
Exciting.
So,
cool, guys. That was an awesome demo and walkthrough, and we're looking for again more examples for sure. And what's next? Roadmap is there, so we can all look around. And people who are watching, who are curious, still drop questions, drop feedback, and test it out. There were already some demo projects started. As soon as it was launched.
Like a really cool CLI tool that shows you data from different sources, and it's got a whole GitHub repo and some videos. Yeah, there's some content already. So
we will catch up next month and maybe mention some of it if it will be already in the wild as well. Cool, guys. Let's get back to work and to solve some other mysteries and problems and challenges ahead of us. Once again, thank you very much for sharing it with us and joining us today, guys. And
thanks for having us.
Looking forward for
absolutely
more updates. And everyone else watching, have a good weekend ahead of you guys.
See you all.
Great.
In a month.
Thanks, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.